Hello and welcome to Why We Are Christians. I'm talking to Don Veinot, and he's back in Illinois, and he's the head of a ministry that is called Midwest Christian Outreach, Inc. And this is our second program with Don, and we're going to focus on one particular topic in this program, and that has to do with something called the Enneagram. Don, where does the word Enneagram come from?
Well, it's a combination of two Greek words, ennea, meaning nine, gramma, meaning something drawn or written. So enneagram, it's a drawing of a circle with three geometric figures inside of it that intersect on the circle and 9 points.
9 points, that's right. And it becomes something that would tell you how you're supposed to be, your true self.
Terminology is very important here. Your true self.
True self, yes, Don, thank you. And you've written a book about it, you and your wife Joy, and with Marcia Montenegro, and right behind you is the book cover. I got the book right here. I highly recommend the book. It's something that is extremely important today because so many Christians have become involved with it, thinking that this is something very biblical.
Right. They think it's a spiritual tool dating back to at least the Desert Fathers and Mothers. Also, some in their storytelling claim that it was used by Sufis and others. I'm not sure why you would want to use a Sufi tool. Sufis are mystical Muslims, is what they are, in the Christian church, but somehow that seems okay to some. In fact, it does not date back to anything beyond about 1915. There is zero evidence that it dates back to the 4th century, much less before that. There is no evidence that it was ever in use by anybody prior to it being revealed by a mystic by the name of G.I. Gurdjieff. He was, what's the word I want to use? Self-actualization. He was working towards self-actualization. Which is, kind of, we look at it as a New Age word. This idea of self-actualization is that you become God-like, essentially. And he drew up the Enneagram, revealed it to the world in around 1915 or 16, and believed it explained everything in the cosmos. It was based on not just a geometric design, but numerology of a sort. And we, in fact, we just did a streamed conference, which you can find on our YouTube channel, a streamed conference where we have one session by Dr. Ron Huggins that just deals with everything to do with how this originated, how the numbering system works together. It was not considered any kind of a personality profiling system at all at that time. It was just the explanation for everything in the cosmos from a mystic.
But then some people that were within the broad Christian community got a hold of this, is my opinion, and it became a spiritual thing as well. And we're talking about Richard Rohr.
Yeah, well, before it got to Richard Rohr, it made a few stops along the way. You have Richard Rohr. There's another one around 1954 by the name of Rodney Collins, who took the symbol and tried to put the astrology to it instead. So he was using it for astrological answers in conjunction with the Enneagram. That never really took off all that well. After that, Oscar Achazo, Bolivian-born, had started a group, his own school, where he was teaching essentially the idea of self-actualization as well. And he got a hold of the Enneagram. And in the process of kind of playing with it, he said it answered the questions of ego fixations, is the way he put it. He's a Jungian psychology. And he then became in contact with two spirit beings who revealed to him the 108 Enneagons, they called them. One of which is the Enneagram of personality, which is what we now have. He didn't use it a lot. He used it some. But the next stop was to one of his disciples, Claudio Naranjo. Claudio Naranjo was, yes, go ahead.
Okay, Don, now, going back, you talked about that this guy came across two spirits, spiritual beings?
Yes, two spirit beings.
Two spirit beings. Now, for us from a biblical Christian background, these would be demonic spirits.
Absolutely. One he called Metatron, the other one he called the Green Ketub. Now, Metatron really comes out of Jewish Kabbalah teaching. The Green Ketub, I'm not certain even where that originates from. But, yeah, the story is told by those who he was involved with at the time that he was in a 7-day trance with one of these beings where he got all this information. He passed it on to Claudio Naranjo. Claudio Naranjo is a psychiatrist. He also was one of the fathers of better spirituality through drugs.
Wow, what a spiritual insight. Wow, I can hardly wait.
Yeah, exactly. So he received the exact enneatypes that we have now, because they didn't exist before this, through automatic writing. Automatic writing is an occult practice where a person has a writing implement in their hand and some other force is moving the implement to write out whatever it is. It's kind of an advanced Ouija board, if you will. Instead of having to move the piece one letter at a time, you've got a spirit being moving your entire hand to write out what it is, and he wrote out the enneatypes. And he admits this. We have video of him admitting this in a video session. And so he then developed the enneatypes and also tried to see if it kind of met psychological terms. Can we observe that these things are true? He then passed it off at a place in Big Sur, California, and Bob Oakes, who's a Roman Catholic, picked it up from him. Bob Oakes, the Roman Catholic, passed it on to some of the newly minted priests, one is which is Mitch Pacwa, and the other is Richard Rohr. Mitch Pacwa was using it, and then started noticing that every time he would take the test, he would have a different personality number, and it bothered him. He started doing research, and the result was he came out with a book. I'll show you the cover. It's called Catholics in the New Age, How Good People Are Being Drawn into Jungian Psychology, the Enneagram, and the Age of Aquarius. Can you see that okay?
Yes, there we go.
Pacwa. That was 1992. Joy and I read it in 92. We knew Mitch. We thought, well, that's interesting. It's really weird. Never have to worry about it in the church because people generally believe the Bible and they wouldn't embrace something like that. It's just too occultic, which it is. That was until around 2011, and we noticed this strange thing. Some of the emergent church individuals were using it because they had met what became their new theologian in all things, Richard Rohr, a Franciscan monk. And he was advocating it. So Marcia wrote an article in 2011, and we both thought, okay, that's interesting, but it's in this weird Catholic group. We're really not going to have to deal with it until 2016. Now you're right. Christian publishers picked it up.
Christian publishers. Let me listen. Thank you for that, Don. I had it a little backwards. One of my favorite, InterVarsity Press, IVP. Another one, Baker Publishing. And another one, Zondervan, who published my very first book in 1972, but it's a different Zondervan. And I know these people because I visit them at the big conferences. I go to their booth. And it's a very sad thing for me when I discovered that these Christian publishers were presenting this to Christian youth, mostly, to Christian young people?
Well, young adults.
Yeah.
And we'd like to say that's primarily, but that's really not. I wish that was the case to some degree, but it's not. It's bigger than that. In 2016, InterVarsity Press published the first book into the evangelical community, which was by Suzanne Stabile and Ian Cron, both disciples of Richard Rohr. This is important. Called The Road Back to You. Now, the title tells you something. Where is the road taking you? Back to you. It's not taking you to God. The second book came out in 2017 by Zondervan, Christopher Huert's book, The Sacred Enneagram. So now the road back to you is guided by the Sacred Enneagram. Both of them are about the Enneagram. The third book came out in 2018, also InterVarsity Press. You got InterVarsity Press, Zondervan, InterVarsity Press, Suzanne Stabile, The Path Between Us. In 2019, Thomas Nelson got into the act and published a 9-volume series by Beth McCord. And at about that time, we started talking. We said, okay, we're doing articles. We're trying to alert people. We have apologetics ministries trying to warn everyone about this, what this is, its origins, and what it's actually teaching. We need to do a book. And so we did this book in 2020. Since then, just so you know how big this has grown, since that time, we now have over 140 pro-Enneagram books by Christian publishers in the church. This is monumental.
Don, would you say that one more time?
There are over 140 pro-Enneagram books by Christian publishers in the church today.
How do you account for that?
Good marketing and deception. There's this idea out there that suggests if you understand your Enneagram number, you can better understand your spouse, better understand those around you, and change and adapt your behaviors accordingly. There's several problems with that. The first one is it is not about your personality. In fact, Christopher Huert, one of they call him master Enneagram teachers, says this: type isn't a type of person, but a path to God. It is not a type of person, but a path to God. What does that mean? Well, you mentioned in the beginning that the goal is to get to your true self. It's not your real self, it's your true self. Your true self, we find out as we read Enneagram material, has never sinned, has never been separated from God. You have always been with God. You created a false self that thinks you're a sinner, and the Enneagram's goal is to help you to the realization that you're not a sinner, to get you back to your true self, which is with God, and shed your false self. That's the goal of the Enneagram.
Thank you, Don. Why, that was so well put. I appreciate that so much. And yes, and I can see how people would go for it. It seems contemporary, interesting.
It is all of that.
Spiritual.
Another book that just came out this year, Dr. Ron Cherry did a really good book to Enneagram. Is it Christian? Enneagram Theology is a Christian, and I would really recommend that. And he points out that if you are the hero of the story, you win every time. And the Enneagram makes you the hero of the story. So it's not really about God, it's about you. Mm-hmm. In the Enneagram teaching, the first incarnation of the Christ is the cosmos. Mm-hmm. God is bigger than the cosmos, but the universe, the cosmos, is the first incarnation of the Christ. Jesus became the Christ by virtue of being part of the creation, just like you and I are the Christ by virtue of being part of the creation. Richard Rohr is what's called a panentheist.
Yes.
Right?
God is in everything.
in and through everything.
In and through. Okay.
Right? He's bigger than everything, so it's not pantheistic. It's panentheistic. Pantheism is that God is everything.
Yes.
In panentheism, God is in and through everything. Good scholar Peter Jones puts it this way. He calls it oneism versus twoism. Oneism is that God is in and through everything. Twoism is that God is separate from creation but interacts with creation. So God isn't the creation. He created it and interacts with it. So there's a diametric opposition between these two views.
Right. You say this, I just want to say this real quick and have you comment on it, page 85, titled a paragraph, God and Jesus in the Enneagram. During an interview with Ian Crone and Suzanne Stabile, co-authors of The Road Back to You, they were asked what Enneagram number Jesus was. What Enneagram number Jesus was. Now, it was 1 through 9, right?
Right.
Jesus represents all numbers, is the reply. It has been said in Christian Enneagram tradition that the Enneagram is the face of God. If you read the Gospels and you're Enneagram literate, secret knowledge, you'll find that Jesus has stories specifically addressing each of the 9 ways of seeing the world. So it's taking Christianity and it's completely changing the nature of it.
Right. It isn't Christianity. It isn't Christian in any way.
No, it is not.
No, it is not. And you have, I'm estimating here, I can't know this for sure, but just based on the number of books that are out there published, if the average, I hear the industry averages for each book purchased, 4 people read it. Let's cut that in half. Let's say 2 people read it. If you have 140 books out there, and you have numbers like the road back to you has sold over 750,000 copies so far. The second book, the Sacred Enneagram, has sold over 100,000 copies. The third book, The Path Between Us, has sold over 100,000 copies. That is just those 3 titles is nearly 1 million copies. That would mean that between 2 and 4 million Christians are actively involved in this Enneagram. Wow. If you have 140 books, and I don't know what the numbers are on that, it's easily 4 million Christians involved with this. This is one of the biggest heresies I have ever seen move this fast through the church.
It certainly is. Now, when we read off the name of the publishers, these are publishers that the evangelical Christian community, these are that kind of publisher. They're not on the liberal end. Right. They're not on the liberal end. They're not on the real, let's say, fundy end. They're in the
mainstream
Christian
evangelicalism,
mainline evangelical Christian churches. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. And you have, for example, Baylor University. They have an Enneagram certificate degree that you can
What?
get. Yes.
No, come on, Don. Baylor?
Baylor University. Yep.
That's a Baptist school.
Yeah. Well, I'm not going to comment on that. It's.
But so one of the renowned schools, Baylor, and they offer certificate in that.
And the Enneagram, yes. Where it's being incorporated more and more into spiritual foundation sorts of stuff in more and more of the Christian universities. And it isn't as though they don't know. We've contacted most of them. We've contacted all the publishers. And we've presented the evidence demonstrating that it has no historical origins. We've pointed out that it is from occultism and explained how that is. Everything is verifiable. And as you'll note in our book, we have over 200 endnotes in there because we documented everything that we have said. We don't want anyone to say you're just giving us your opinion. No, this is what they say themselves. The Enneagram Institute, which is where most people are sent to take their personality test, is a New Age organization founded by New Agers, run by New Agers, but for some reason Everyone is being sent to that to find out, as Christians, who they are. Helen Palmer is a name that is very important. She's a New Age psychic and one of the key Enneagram teachers and masters.
Now, Don, I'm going to have to pose a question here, and we didn't have a chance to talk earlier about this, and so I just would say, please feel free to disagree with me. But now my impression would be, based on my background and the books that I've written and the ministry I've done, that exposure to occult-oriented practices, even with a Christian tag on it, exposes you to demonic influences. That's what I'm thinking. How do you approach that? What do you think about that?
I don't disagree with that. I'm always a little cautious, though, because the Bible's pretty clear that there's three things that are at war with us: the world, the flesh, and the devil.
Right.
I think sometimes the devil gets far too much credit for things that we do to ourselves. So, yeah, I think you come under spiritual influences, but you also come under the influences of false teaching. And when you come under the false teaching, you start believing false things. And when you start believing false things, Satan doesn't have to really trouble himself with you, because you pretty much are going to make your course in the wrong direction all by yourself.
Thank you for that. Don, you have taught me something. You have taught me. I'm going to incorporate that into my way of approaching things.
Yeah.
And I want to
because realistically,
thank
the
you for
solution
that.
is still the same. What is the Enneagram telling you? It's telling you that you are the central character in the story of the Bible. You're not. God is the central character in the story of the Bible.
Right.
You and I, we get to be character actors in his story.
Yeah. Yeah. Would you imagine that if a person was engaged in Enneagram, that might be the focus of their ministry instead of proclamation of the gospel?
Absolutely. Absolutely. We have, here's what we have. We have churches that are using the Enneagram for marriage counseling, Enneagram for membership. They're using it to bring in members. They use it for a 9-week preaching series. It is virtually throughout the church in almost everything they're doing. The churches that are involved with it, Sandals Church, for example, in California, you had mentioned it before we went on the air, is one of the big promoters of this, and almost everything they do is revolved around that. We have organizations that have started Enneagram training for pastors who can either then incorporate it into their church, or they can leave the church and start their own Enneagram consulting firm. Beth McCord, Presbyterian, was trained by 6 New Agers. She wasn't trained by anyone Christian at any time. Started her business, has become quite wealthy at that. That doesn't matter to me, because if you're wealthy, you're wealthy, and I don't think God is opposed to wealth per se. However, she has trained, as of 2 years ago, she had trained over 600 Enneagram coaches around the world.
And where's she located?
She is, I'm not certain anymore, Missouri, I think. She was in Southern Illinois for a very long time. I'm not sure where she lives now. But her books are with Thomas Nelson Publishers.
Okay. All right. How about the charismatic community? Any indication? And I pastored a charismatic church for 10 years. Our church is not charismatic now, but I'm wondering if there's an opening in charismatic Christianity.
It's open for everybody. Anybody who takes this and thinks this will help me to better understand myself and others, to be a more mature, informed Christian. It's a great spiritual tool. It crosses all of those lines. We had, in fact, if they go to, we have a webpage, enneagramsecret.com. There's a lot of videos on there. One of the videos is a discussion between Marcia Montenegro and Todd Wilson. Todd Wilson is co-founder of the Institute for Pastor Theologians. He is also an Enneagram proponent and wrote a book for InterVarsity Press, The Enneagram Goes to Church, which we wrote a response article on. And he argues that the Enneagram helped him. Yes, it comes from the occult, but that's okay, because as a mature Christian, we can use occult things without harm. He's the head of the Center for Pastor Theologians. He should know better than that.
Yes, indeed.
Right? It's crossing every boundary that it's staggering to me to watch.
Wow. Well, I have to admit it's a little disconcerting for me to hear all of this and to have read your book and to see what's happening and how clever a disguise it all is, hoping that in time people will wake up a little bit and discard that and turn back to being a simple follower of Jesus.
Right.
Not having to discover your true self.
Well, the Bible actually tells us all about our true self, and it tells us how to resolve the problem. Now we're going back to something that we just raised. We raised in the last program. We'll raise again here. The role of the pastor is really simple to understand. There's two parts to it. Guard the flock, Acts 20:28 and following, from false teachers. Second is to train the flock. The pastoral epistles guide him in that, in which he also exposes false teachers, the Apostle Paul does, in the pastoral epistles. Those are the two functions. As churches are doing those things, these issues become less of a problem. If you're teaching things in context, book by book, chapter by chapter, verse by verse, applying them to your life, you will understand who you are, why you do what you do, and how to, as God works in you, to see your behavior change. Because I have to tell you a secret, and this is something that was hard learned for me. It isn't me who does the changing. It is God. It says that he that has begun a good work in you will continue it until the day of Christ Jesus. And I often have to tell people, you can do it easy or you can do it hard, but rest assured, you're going to do it because it's the Holy Spirit doing it to you.
Right. Well, Don, thank you so much for spending the time with us. Thank you for your work. The Lord bless you and your wife, Joy, and the people that work with you in your outreach. And so we thank you, Don, and I'll be looking for these programs. Tell other people about them. You can go to milleravenuechurch.org and you'll find our television programs, and you can let other people know how to find these interviews that we've done with Don Veinot, and they can watch them themselves. Let's go to town and let's go to work. So long.